What's good? What's good? What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome to the Mic Check Podcast. You're here with your co-host, Quinton Dame Lilley, Q, as everybody likes to call me. Appreciate everybody that's going to be joining this podcast here shortly. My confusion and my apologies for the confusion, I should say, on the mix-up with the link there. I don't know what happened, but that link crashed as soon as I joined. So one of these days, I'm going to get this live stream technology straight and in order. We're gonna wait for a few people to join, a few watchers. I know people were waiting to see this. My apologies also for not being able to get on as quickly as I wanted to earlier. It's been a hectic week, a lot of busy things going on in my life outside of the boxing world and the boxing fan that I am. So I do appreciate everybody that's been able to keep track and keep up with everything that T's been doing on the YouTube page as well as on social media where I have been as well. So appreciate everybody joining. And let's get to talking, man. We're going to talk about a lot of different things in the boxing world. There are a couple of different fights that are going to happen. There's two main fights happening this weekend with Johnny Beck coming back to defend his WBO title against Butler. I think it's a Jason Butler. I can't remember the guy's name. And then also Rolly Romero is going to be fighting for the WBA full title. They announced that earlier this week. WBA 140-pound title. We'll give my thoughts on that as far as the fight in general, as well as just some other boxing stuff that's been going on. So first things first, let's go ahead and recap for last week with Canelo Alvarez winning a unanimous decision over John Ryder in Guadalajara, Mexico, his first return to Mexico in what is now just over 11 years. Um, a strong performance, in my opinion, one that I think over time, when people look back at his resume of fights, it will be included on that list of probably top 10 or 12 wins. It was not the peak Canelo that we've seen from the 2019, 2018 days when, Canelo was fighting Triple G in a rematch when he fought Danny Jacobs for the IBF title to unify those belts. It was not a peak performance, but what it was, in my opinion, was a strong performance, one that clearly saw him as the victor against a really tough guy in John Ryder. I know some people were expecting that he was going to stop him. I did as well, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I thought it was a solid performance. If I had to give him a letter grade, I probably would have said I'd give him probably about a B, maybe a B minus for that performance, just because we've seen him at that A plus level where his defense is really clean, it's really crisp, his offense is clean, he's not missing many of his punches and shots that he throws. But overall, I thought that it was a strong performance. We will see if some people that do join the discussion are interested in disagreeing with that point or not. That remains to be seen at this point. So let's see here. Uh, and yeah, man, I mean, it was really one of those things that I thought, honestly, for Canelo was a fight that was necessary to happen because of the fact that, you know, um, he needed another fight to try to stay active. He'd been out for, a decent amount of time. What is it now? Five months of this year prior to his fight, and then he hadn't fought since September. So it's been almost 8 months since Canelo had been out. So obviously, he needed to get back in the ring, and this was a great opportunity for him to fight back at home in front of his home crowd. So from that standpoint, I thought that it was a necessary fight. Now it'll be really interesting to see what he does from here because it looks like he's either going to try to get a rematch with Dimitri Bivol if they're able to come to an agreement on the weight. Now, the weight is a very interesting topic because on one hand, you'll have people that are going to say, well, Bivol already beat him at 175. What is there for Bivol to win by rematching him at the same weight for the same belt other than money? Money can be a determining factor for a lot of decisions that we make in life. Obviously, that could be a determining factor for Bivol if he wants to make more money than he did the last time, maybe. But it sounds like Bivol's team has been trying to push to get Canelo's 168-pound belts on the line in a fight where Bivol would move down to rematch Canelo at a weight that's, according to Canelo, more suitable for him. But it looks like that's not something that necessarily Team Canelo wants to do. So, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But that's one option. He could go with a guy who's on the PBC side of things, whether it's a David Benavidez, Jamal Charlo, David Morrell. Um, there's even been some talks about even maybe facing Demetrius Andrade finally. So there's a lot of different ways that Canelo's September fight can go. It'll be interesting to see how it does go, just because we know for a fact that obviously, September is his date. Mexican Independence Day is his date. That's the date that he always likes to fight on. So, it'll be really interesting to see how that goes. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how things turn out. But yeah, man, we will get into some things here shortly. Also, going to talk about the two fights that are happening this weekend with Yanni Beck and his struggles with getting a fight with anybody of note at middleweight. We'll also talk a little bit about the fact that Tank Davis has now been given a verdict in his hit and run accident that happened quite a few years ago now, where he basically was able to avoid jail time. So we will get into all of that here shortly. Um, yeah, so we're looking forward to getting some interaction here online, and we will see what some people have had to say about some of the things that are going to be going on here shortly. So let's see. Oh yeah, and one other thing for those of you who are actually waiting to go ahead and see what's going to come of this Inoue Fulton fight. T has done a lot of work talking about that fight, talking about what he thinks of that fight, and that's going to be a really good fight that's coming up in July. So please make sure that you guys are tapped in for that as well, because that's going to be a very, very good indicator of where my pound for pound records are going to go. Last time I was on, we talked with Ring IQ about my pound for pound list, and definitely that pound for pound list is going to be affected if Stephen Fulton is able to dethrone Naoya Inoue. Obviously, as the guy that I have number one on my pound for pound list, which I understand, it's controversial for some. It is, a hot topic. Pound for pound lists are always, always, always going to be that way, just because they're so subjective. And there's not really a definitive way to rank one guy ahead of another outside of varying criteria. So, you guys want to check that out as well. Let's see. Let's get to some boxing news just in general, man. We'll talk about some stuff that's here on Boxing Scene. I'm pulling it up now. So we talked about earlier, Rolly Romero is going to be fighting for the 140-pound WBA title today, this evening. And my initial thoughts, I kind of gave them on social media, but ultimately, I don't think that this was the right move by the WBA by allowing Alberto Puello to have given Rolly Romero a voluntary title defense at 140 for a few reasons. Number one, Rolly Romero's last fight, he was knocked out at 135 pounds by Gervonta Tank Davis. He hasn't gotten a win since. He's moved up in weight, but because of that, he's supposed to just get a title fight. I mean, I don't think I necessarily agree with that. That's not something I can ride with, to be honest with you. And then number two, just the simple fact that because Puello did test positive for a banned substance, I can understand you stripping him, but I wonder, why is O'Hara Davies not considered for this fight when, according to what I've seen, and I'm going to look it up while I'm talking about this, I'm pretty sure O'Hara Davies is ranked in the top two at 140 pounds. Why was he the guy that was not given this opportunity? Let's see here, go down to super lightweight, or as some people call it, junior welterweight. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, Ismael Barroso and O'Hara Davies, number one and number two. Number one and number two. Why is Rolly Romero given this opportunity when, truth be told, it should be O'Hara Davies? Makes no sense to me. You guys let me know what you think about that. I think that has something to do with the PPC having an inside track on the WBA title. Everybody knows that, just like they know that Bob Arum and Top Rank have the inside track when you're talking about WBO titles. Right, a lot of their guys fight for the WBO titles. They're up and coming prospects. They fight for secondary and regional belts under the WBO ranking system for Top Rank. And the same thing is true when you talk about PBC and Al Heyman. It's not any different, but it is a glaring issue when you have guys in your sanctioning body that pay sanctioning fees to be ranked at a certain weight to fight for ranking spots. They get to number two, like O'Hara Davies is, and now he doesn't get the shot. I don't really agree with that. I don't think that that's the right thing to do, nor do I think that that's something that should be done in boxing in general. So I don't know, man. I don't know. It seems like an unfortunate situation because a guy's going to miss out on a title fight that I don't think that he ultimately is going to end up getting. If I have to be completely honest with you, I mean, I really don't. I don't think he's going to get it. And it's one of those things, man. I mean, unfortunately, it seems like this is what's going to end up being the case with this belt, is that it's going to end up staying on the PBC side of things now that Josh Taylor vacated the belt. Alberto Puello fought for the vacant title. And even after he was stripped, the opportunity was not given to a guy who's ranked in the top two to fight for it against Ismael Barroso. Looks like it's going to be Ismael Barroso versus Rolly Romero, which, if I had to be honest, I think that Rolly Romero has a good chance of winning that fight. Ismael Barroso is 40. He looks 50. And he doesn't have any notable wins on his record currently. So, I mean, you make of that what you will. Now, with regards to what will happen next, in my opinion, I think that Rolly will win this fight, and then that will be used as a bargaining chip to get a rematch with Gervonta Tank Davis. And I said this right after the Gervonta Tank Davis fight against Ryan Garcia. I think that he should fight Frank Martin. I really do. I really do. T, man, I did reshare the link on Twitter. I corrected my link, man. I don't know what happened, but this link crashed. The first one I did repost it. If you go and you look at my timeline, the last retweet that I put up does have the correct link on it. Appreciate that, man. Thank you for sharing. I know you're at work and can't join. Wish we could be on together, but we'll do something again soon. But yeah, man, I mean, realistically, it's one of those situations where I think that Frank Martin against Tank Davis is an all-action fight. You talking about a fight that's well worth the price of admission. That's a fight worth every penny you want to put on it. I'm just being real with you. Frank is all action. Tank is a counterpuncher. You put those two dudes together, I mean, you're talking about wonderful, wonderful, wonderful types of things that can happen, in that fight. And that's a guy in Frank Martin really has been pushing, to get to world level as of recently. Why not fight the biggest name, on your side of the street, arguably the biggest American-born fighter from a notoriety standpoint? I'm sure Frank will make a career high payday from that. Why don't Spence and Derek James ask for that fight? Why aren't they demanding that fight? Why wouldn't Al do that fight? You tell me. I think that that's a great fight to have. I know people have been talking about Keyshawn Davis, and it's a fight that I'd like to see. I'd like to see Frank Martin against Keyshawn Davis. I understand that Keyshawn is not at the point in his career maybe that, that Frank is at currently at that, that world contender level status. I think that Keyshawn is still somewhat of a prospect. I think he's still under 10 fights now. But, I mean, a lot of guys get fast-tracked. A lot of guys get moved quickly. Look at David Morrell. You look back at Katie Taylor. You look back at guys like Vasily Lomachenko. All of those guys, were given opportunities to fight at world level based on their amateur backgrounds. Keyshawn has a deep amateur background. I think that he needs to be moved at a pace. I think he now has 8, total fights as a professional. I mean, I don't see much else to do other than to get him up in there with some, world level contenders, not world titleists, not former world champions, but some strong world level contenders. So that's the fight I'd like to see. I don't want to see a Rolly Romero Tank Davis rematch. I just don't. I don't think that there's any way Rolly wins a fight against Tank. I don't think he knocks Tank out. I don't think he has the footwork or the boxing skill to stand up to Tank's IQ and his ability to move around the ring. I don't think he has anything for him. That's just my honest opinion. To a little less extent, I don't really want to see an Isaac Cruz Tank Davis rematch. Um, I I just don't. I really don't. T says here, former world champions are a good step up. I completely agree with that. But if we're talking about Keyshawn Davis and who he should be fighting, if I'm on his side of things, I want to move him into fights with guys of the ilk of a Frank Martin, Jackson Marinez, guys that maybe have not won a title but are at that level, at that world title contender level, because I want to see what he has. Because I mean, he's smoking these guys that he's fighting at the contender or at the prospect level. He's smoking them, and I really don't see any more point, at this point with him, as deep as his amateur background is, in continuing to give him those kind of fights. He's going to be moving out of 135 at some point soon. Let's see if he can maybe get in there and maybe possibly get himself to a world title in 12 to 24 months before he ends up moving up and out of the lightweight division. He's a tall kid, man. I mean, he's he's um he's a good fighter, and I think that he has a lot of potential, but I think he's going to eventually end up moving up. Um, T says, I don't think he's ready for contenders in the top 3. Well, I guess that depends on what your opinion of Frank Martin is, right? I mean, I would agree with you that Frank Martin is a very, very good contender. I think that he's at that level where he should be getting those world title challenging positions now. So he may not be ready for a Frank Martin, but it's a fight that I wouldn't be mad if it got made. I mean, hey, if Keyshawn and his team and Bo Mack and Terrence, who spars him often, Shakur, who spars him often, if they think that he's ready for it, then I mean, who am I to tell him that he shouldn't do it or shouldn't believe that those are the kind of fights that he should be in? For Frank Martin's standpoint, Tank Davis is the fight. I said it twice already. This is my 3rd time saying it on the live. Tank is the fight. That's the fight I want. I'm banging on that door. If I'm Frank Martin, that's the fight you got to give me. You got to give me that fight because there's not any other, guys of note to fight at 135 on the PBC side of things. I don't really see a point in, asking for a Ryan Garcia fight at this point. I don't think he would take it anyway, coming off the loss he just had. I don't really see much of anybody else, above Frank that he could fight at 135, which is where he's trying to contend at. Excuse me. Excuse me. Dealing with some allergies here. But anyway, yeah, so that's my thoughts on that. I think O'Hara Davies should have gotten this title shot against Ismael Barroso, but O'Hara Davies is not with a major network or major TV schedule. So that's what that is. And this last part of what you said, T, Martin being in line for Tank soon. It should be now. Frank is 30. What are we waiting on? I don't know what we're waiting for. Like, I really don't. I mean, Keyshawn, I get it. That's not something that he has to gain from that. But what did he have to gain from Jackson Marinez? Not much. But the last part of what you said, Martin being in line for Tank soon, I think that's the problem, bro. I think it needs to be now. I think that needs to be the next fight. I don't see any point in waiting to try to make that fight at any other later date. I don't want to see an Isaac Cruz rematch. I don't want to see a Rolly Romero rematch. I don't want to see any of these other guys. You know, I just I don't see any value in anything other than Frank Martin versus Tank Davis if you're on PBC as a lightweight. That's the biggest fight that they can make. That's the biggest fight that can be made right now, and I think that's the fight that they should go ahead and do. Williams Zepeda would be a very, very, very good fight if Frank was able to get a Williams Zepeda fight. That possibly could be another alternative if he's not able to get Tank in the ring. But again, man, I mean, Frank's 30, bro. Spence has to have some pull to get his guy. Derek James has to have some pull to get their guy a title shot. He's well worthy now. He's well in position. I don't see any reason why Frank should not be getting a Tank versus himself fight. Tank versus Haney is a better fight. I agree. Will Haney and Tank fight? Probably not. Probably not. I think that Haney is going to go uh, up to 140 and stay with Top Rank, or up to 140 and go back to Matchroom. Matchroom just signed Regis Prograis. Matchroom is in the possibility of signing Subriel Matias. So those are the two guys that possibly could be lined up for Haney to get titles from if he was willing to fight those guys at some point, if he wants to sign back with Top Rank, or excuse me, with Matchroom, excuse me. Let's see here. What else is on the docket here? Oh, yes. Boxing Scene wrote a story a couple hours ago, said Liam Smith hopes to secure a crack at Johnny Beck's WBO title. Well, Liam Smith, I'm confused about why we went ahead and did the, we did the Eubank fight again. I don't know. I really don't see him fighting Yanni Beck if he wasn't going to fight him after this last fight. I mean, maybe he gets that fight, possibly after a Eubank rematch, but I thought that that's what they were lining up for him. Honestly, I thought he was going to fight Tim Tszyu. I thought that Liam Smith was going to go back to 154, fight Tim Tszyu to try to get that mandatory status so he can get that vacant title when it does go vacant, because it looks like Jermell is on an extended layoff now. I mean, it's been just about a year that he's been out, and we have not seen anything else. Here's what I'll say about this, T. Why would Devin avoid the biggest payday or the best smoke? I don't think it's called avoiding. I think it's a reality that Devin has had a hard time making 135 for a while. I'm sure that he would make it one more time if a Tank fight was a reality, but I don't think it's going to be offered. I don't think so. I don't think that they're going to pay Haney as much as he's going to want to get paid to come over. I don't think that he wants to sign with the PBC long term. And I don't think that he's going to be able to be, weight claused, rematch claused, weigh-in date claused, as much as Ryan was, because Ryan had a little less negotiating power outside of his popularity. I think that Devin having all the belts, him being a pound-for-pound fighter, I think that he has a little bit more of a ability to negotiate. But I don't think that Tank is going to go for it. I don't think that his team is going to accept some of the terms that maybe Devin will want for that fight. I don't know. I mean, is he going to make Devin have to have a weight clause, rehydration clause in his contract? I don't think that Devin would go for that. I don't. I think that he has a hard enough time making 135. I don't think he's going to volunteer to be put, on a restriction as far as what he can rehydrate to. And maybe Tank won't do that. Maybe he thinks that Devin, because he's not as big of a puncher as Ryan, that he doesn't have anything to worry about in that aspect. But just my pessimism on cross promotional deals being made between a guy who's super duper duper popular and a guy who's just well known on the boxing side of things. Those kinds of fights seem really, really difficult to be made a lot of the times in this day and age, which is why I don't think that fight is what's going to happen. I think that Haney's going to move up to 140. I think he's going to stay with Top Rank, or he's going to go to Matchroom and move on with his career, because he's busting at the seams at 135. I really, really do think that. I really don't see any real reason why he would do anything other than that at this point. Let's see here. Stephen Butler is the guy who's fighting Yanibek. I don't know what I said earlier, but it's Stephen Butler is the guy who's going to be fighting earlier. So let's see. So Carl Froch says that Anthony Joshua is past his best and probably has no legacy. Wow, Carl Froch. I mean, for a guy who looked up to Carl Froch, right, when he was coming up in the ranks, is there anybody who's followed Anthony Joshua's career knows when Carl fought George Groves in that rematch, Anthony Joshua was on his undercard. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but Anthony Joshua was also on Carl Froch's undercard when he fought Lucien Bute. I could be wrong about that. I'll actually double check that right now because I'm pretty sure Carl Froch fought Lucien Bute in his hometown of Nottingham, England. And I'm pretty sure that Anthony Joshua was on his undercard. So this was a guy who, for all intents and purposes, I mean, he looked up to Carl Froch and had a good relationship with him for a long time through Eddie Hearn, his promoter, who he's been with his whole career. But it looks like, unfortunately, Carl Froch has lost all faith in Anthony Joshua and says that he has no legacy. I'm going to strongly disagree with that. Whether it is, and let's see, no, he was not on that. Okay. I made a mistake. Anthony Joshua was not on Carl Froch's card against Lucien Bute, but he was on the George Groves rematch undercard. He was 5-0 at the time. Anthony Joshua fat leg on the undercard of that fight. So there you go. Yeah, man. I mean, I think that Anthony Joshua is getting a real bad rap right now, to be honest with you. It seems like he's getting, the short end of the stick as far as perception from other people because, he's not at the best of his game now. I will agree with the first part of the statement where he says he's not at the best of his game. Excuse me. But to say that Anthony Joshua doesn't have a legacy when he's probably one of only maybe 3 UK fighters who's ever had multiple stadium fights. He fought at Wembley Stadium against Klitschko and not Pulev, but Klitschko and Povetkin. He fought at Millennium Stadium against Takam and Joseph Parker. And he fought against Usyk at Tottenham Stadium. So he's had 5 stadium fights. He's the only guy in the UK that's had that many stadium fights. If that alone doesn't say that he has a legacy, I don't know what does. He's the last unified heavyweight champion since Lennox Lewis for the UK, which Lennox was last a unified champion in like 2003. So that's 20 years basically. Well, let's just call it 19 years because Anthony lost his belts in 2022 and has not regained them since then. But for that period of time, there had not been another, unified heavyweight champion. I think that says something. I think that he's breathed life back into the UK boxing scene from the aspect of high purses, high demands, pay-per-views, and just the overall competitiveness. I mean, look at what Boxer, Queensberry, which is on BT Sport, and Matchroom have had to do in the last few months to try to compete with each other. I think that all has a lot to do, not only with Anthony Joshua, but specifically him, Tyson Fury, guys like those two that are really just spearheading, the attention and the market that's been drawn towards boxing in the last couple of years. Both of those guys have had a huge part of that. Even if I don't like Tyson Fury, I can be honest and say that he's, he has at least brought a little bit of attention to the UK boxing scene from that aspect. So, I mean, I think that it's unfair for Carl Froch to be saying that Anthony Joshua doesn't have a legacy. Maybe he doesn't become a Hall of Famer like Carl Froch is. If he wants to say that he doesn't have a Hall of Fame legacy, maybe that's arguable, right? Because it's so hard to get into the Boxing Hall of Fame. I mean, my goodness, I think they only let like 3 or 5 people in every year. And there's like boxers who have been eligible for 10, 15, 20 years that have not got in yet. I mean, man, it's a tough call. So I think that's unfair of him. Shakur Stevenson says he would beat the hell out of Isaac Cruz. Tell you this, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. Shakur Stevenson, Isaac Cruz, you can give me that all day long. You can give me that all day long. I would love to see that fight. Because if you're talking about a guy in Isaac Cruz that is aggressive, we saw what he was in the tank fight, durable, and does not stop coming forward. That's the perfect style to have against a guy like Shakur Stevenson, who's defensively responsible, selective with his punches, doesn't make many defensive mistakes. So, Isak is the perfect guy if you are at the same level, which he may not be. But if you're at the same level as a Shakur Stevenson from a skills perspective, as a pressure fighter, that's the kind of guy you have to be in order to beat Shakur Stevenson. I don't think he will beat him, but I think it's a fight that would be really, really entertaining. And possibly, I think it's a fight that Shakur would get hurt in. And for those that would like to join, please just make sure you give me a chat comment down below, and we will definitely make sure that we get you hopped on if you'd like to join. So, but yeah, man, I mean, I think that that's something really, really interesting that could happen. I don't know that it will because I know the WBC did mandate that back at their convention last fall for Shakur Stevenson to fight Isaac Cruz. And Shakur was not able to get that fight and ended up having to skip all the way down the list of the WBC rankings to find somebody to fight before he fought Yoshino, the guy who he fought in his lightweight debut. Let me see if I can pull up these WBC rankings for you so we can see where is Isaac Cruz in these ratings currently. Lightweight WBC. Let's see. Just give me 1 second here. Obviously, Devin Haney is the champ. Vasily Lomachenko's number 2. Isaac Cruz is number 2, or excuse me, technically number 3. And then Shakur comes in at number 5 right behind him. So there you go. There you go. There's the talk on that. Why wouldn't they make that fight? Well, red tape. It's the same thing I mentioned earlier when T was talking about Haney versus Tank. Haney is probably not going to sign with PBC. And I don't think that Isaac Cruz is going to be able to or be allowed to cross over to Top Rank to have that fight. And we all know that he would be the clear B-side in a fight against Shakur Stevenson. It's a fight that would be nice to happen, but I don't think that it's going to. I don't. Tim Zhu says, I'm staying active while Charlo is in Las Vegas getting smashed. Smashed is in drinking too much. Now, I don't know if he's drinking too much. I don't live with the guy. I don't spend my time following his posts on social media. But if he is losing a lot of traction. And I do know that the longer that this fight takes to be made at 154 between Jermell Charlo and Tim Zhu, the better it is for Tim Zhu. The same rationale that a lot of people are using to say that the longer it takes for Canelo to fight David Benavidez, the better it is for David Benavidez. That same rationale exists in a fight between Tim Zhu and Jermell Charlo. Jermell is in his early 30s. Tim is, I think, in his late 20s. So he's just reaching his prime, and Jermell is starting to, from an age perspective, not necessarily from a skills perspective, but from an age perspective, he's starting to dip away from his prime now. And he hasn't fought in over a year. And he's probably not going to have a fight until at least September. And the reason that I know that that's true is because typically if they're going to put on a fight, you need at least 8 weeks of a training camp. And they typically want to sell tickets at least a month before the fight. And there's not been any inkling or any kind of rumors as to when he's going to get to fight coming off that hand and wrist injury that he sustained in preparation for the initial Tim Zhu fight that was supposed to happen early this year. I think it was supposed to happen in January. So there's that. T says 3 years apart. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Who we talking about is 3 years apart? Who's 3 years apart? You talking about Tim Zhu and Jermell? I don't know if that's what he's talking about. Maybe that's the case. But let's see, man. I mean, what's Tim do? I think he's 28. Where's Jermel? Yeah, Tim Zoo's 28. Jermel is 32. So it's 4 years basically. Maybe a little less than that. Three years and some change. So yeah. I think it just remains to be seen because I mean, in general, I don't know that Jermel is going to be able to continue to cut back down to 154 healthy and strong. And this is the first fight he has to have. I told T this before. We had this conversation on social media a couple of days ago. The difference here is that it's not like it's a voluntary defense where Jermel can have a warm up fight and then fight Tim Tszyu. The first fight he's going to have back, if he's back at 154 with that brown belt still around his waist, has to be Tim Tszyu, unless Tim is injured or unless Tim moves up or unless Tim takes step aside to wait, which I don't think that he would do that in this situation. I think he's waited long enough, in his opinion. I don't know that it's necessarily an issue with cutting the weight. I don't think that it's cutting the weight. I think that the issue around it is that he's been at 154 his entire career. He's getting older. It doesn't get easier to cut the weight. And even if you're able to cut the weight, how are you able to perform after doing so? And how is he able to perform in general just with the injury? Let's say forget the weight, right? Let's say forget the weight. Let's just talk about the injury and coming back from that. How well is he going to be able to perform with that if he's been out of the ring for so long? Tim Tszyu, like I mentioned before with Isaac Cruz, if you're on the same level as a pressure fighter, which a lot of people don't think that he is to Jermell Charlo as a boxer puncher, that's the kind of style you have to have in order to give a boxer puncher problems, is to be a pressure fighter, to put the boxer puncher in positions where they are forced to bang, forced to have a slugfest, and they're not able to use their skill set, move around the ring, pot shot, make you miss, make you pay kind of a deal. I think that Tim is on a good string of fights here, and I think that this Ocampo fight is going to be a good just tick over. I think that it's going to be not a warm up because we don't even know if he's necessarily going to get to fight Jermel next, but I think that it's a good mindset to have that if I'm not able to get my title, I'm not just going to sit on my ranking. And I think that a lot of American fighters need to take heed to what Tim is doing because Tim has the ability to fight back at home, because he has a promoter back at home that can get him fight dates when his American broadcaster cannot at this moment or has not been able to at this moment. Getting busy and staying busy is the best route to go so that whenever that opportunity comes up to fight for that WBO world title, he will be in a very, very, um, uh, advantageous situation to be at his best. T says here the injury risks aren't as much of a deal if Mel heals properly while staying in shape. Yeah, a lot of ifs, a lot of ifs. If he's healthy, if he stayed in shape, if he doesn't have any effects from the long layoff. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but this might be the longest layoff of Jermel's career. Let's see. So he fought twice in 2019. He had a 9-month layoff between the Tony Harrison and the Jason Rosario fight for obvious reasons. That was the pandemic. Then he had 10 months off before he fought Castaño the first time. Then he had another 10 months off before he fought Castaño the second time. And there's no fight date currently. And we are already at exactly a year. It'll be a year from his fight against Castaño, the rematch in LA, tomorrow. Tomorrow makes a year. He fought him on May 14th. So I don't think that if they fought today, best against the best, at their best, that Tim Tszyu would win that fight. But I wonder if Jermel will be at his best whenever that fight does happen, because it will have to be next. Which, I don't know, maybe that means that Jermel's going to move up to 160. I know he's been rumored to be doing that for a while. He just talked about having a Canelo fight, which let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about that. So Jermell Charlo was poolside, chilling out, relaxing, doing whatever he was doing, and basically said that Canelo should fight him. An interesting take, right? It seems like maybe because Canelo is now not at the peak of where he was, there are some extra guys that may not have done so before that are asking for a Canelo fight. I think that Jermell, while if the opportunity arose, I think that he would take the fight. My question would be, is he going to be allowed to take that fight under the terms that Canelo may want? And what I mean by that is, if Canelo says, okay, I'll do this fight, but it's got to be on the zone. Okay, I'll do this fight, but Eddie Hearn's going to be promoting the fight. Is that something that's going to be allowed to happen? I'm only going based off of history here, but everybody knows that's been following Canelo's trek at 168. The first guy he wanted to try to fight was Caleb Plant, and there were a lot of issues around getting an agreement with Caleb Plant to come to the zone because that's where the fight was supposed to happen originally, and it didn't happen. And I think that Caleb Plant had said something about he didn't want to have a short camp. And then the second time that they tried to offer him, there were some issues with the network situation. So then when he became the final guy that had to be beaten in order for Canelo to be undisputed, Canelo just said, you know what, I'm not even going to go there with the whole DAZN thing because I really just want this belt. So I'm going to come to you. I'm going to fight on your network. I'm going to get the fight. And this is what it's going to be, just to make sure that the fight did happen. It did happen, but it took, 3 different negotiations, throughout Canelo's time trying to gain all the belts at 168 before that actually did happen. So I wonder if Mel is going to be allowed to cross over because it looks like Canelo likes fighting on his own. It looks like he enjoys the promotion and he enjoys the work that Eddie does for him. And he clearly would be the A side in a fight against Jermell Charlo, despite the fact that I think Jermell Charlo is a pound for pound fighter. I have him in my top pound for pound list. I don't know what really negotiating power he would have in that situation because he wouldn't be bringing anything to the table for Canelo to win. He's not the more popular fighter. He's not going to be bringing him a belt. He's not going to make him closer to undisputed at a weight class. He doesn't hold any lineal title. So in this situation, honestly, it would just be a really, really, really good fight that people would be interested in watching. But I think people would be just as interested in seeing him fight Jermall Charlo or seeing him fight David Benavidez or seeing him fight, Dimitri Bivol. I think that all those guys are around that same, when you talk about the pay-per-view buys, I think they would be all around the same amount of interest because you're talking about anywhere from 400 to 700,000 pay-per-view buys. That's what I think. Maybe it doesn't do 400 if it's Bivol because it's a fight that people don't think that Canelo's going to win. But, I think that those are all pretty fairly equally interesting fights to watch from a boxing perspective. Let's see here. Ben Shalom explains the Fraser Clark Wardley fallout. Clark is the A side. The fight will be on his terms. So Ben Shalom, who is the promoter for Boxer, who has their fights hosted on Sky Sports, was in the news quite a bit this past week for a purse bid that he pulled Fraser Clark, Olympic bronze medalist, heavyweight Olympic bronze medalist from the UK, out of that he promotes in a fight that was ordered for him to fight the British champion in Fabio Wardley. Sorry, I forgot his name there for a second. Fabio Wardley is I think he's the British heavyweight titleist. He's promoted by Matchroom. Neither side could get a deal done. There was a report that Boxer had sent Fabio Wardley an offer that he thought was not even half of what he made in his last fight. So he didn't accept it. He decided to go to purse bids and let Eddie Hearn, his own promoter, bid for the fight. The day of the purse bid, um, Ben Shalom pulls his own fighter out of the fight and says that we are not going to go ahead and take this opportunity right now. Fabio Wardley gets kind of left out in the cold because Fraser Clark is now going to fight, I think June 10th, I think, or the 11th, one of those two. I think it's the 10th. And he's going to have a warm-up fight, and they'll come around to the British title when the fight is on their terms, which is kind of funny because Fraser Clark's management team, 258 Management, which also manages the career of Anthony Joshua and a host of other fighters, were the ones who originally asked for that fight. So his management team, on one hand, wants him to have the fight. His promoter, on the other hand, doesn't want him to have the fight, him being Fraser Clark we're talking about. The purse bid gets called, and the promoter nixes the whole situation and says, no, we're not going to do this. I'm going to give him another fight against somebody nobody's ever heard of. We're not going to do this fight. And then tries to spin it and make it sound like it was a situation in which, you know, they want the fight to happen. They want it, but it's going to be on their terms. Is it a duck? Yes, it's a duck. Do I blame Ben for doing it? Kind of, because he could have done this a while ago. When the fight originally got ordered, he could have just said, hey, listen, like, we're not going to do this. He's not ready for this. Fraser's not ready for this fight. But the interesting thing is what will happen from here between 258 Management and Boxer, because clearly there was some miscommunication there about what should be done for his career. It looks like the fight that was supposed to happen, that, you know, 258 Management wanted to happen, didn't happen. And it looks like they're not going to be able to go ahead and get the fight done because their promoter pretty much, you know, vetoed the deal. You know, he vetoed what was going on. So I don't know, man. I think that, you know, more promoters need to be more willing to do fights together. They need to be more flexible and able to let their fighters take opportunities if they're going to be on other sides of the street, because ultimately I think that that's what happened. I think that Ben Shalom knew what he wanted to pay for the fight, and if the fight was going to cost a dime over that, he wasn't going to allow the fight to be had on another network. I think that if, you know, Fabio Wardley had been willing to take the purse that he was offered, they would have done the fight on Sky Sports happily and made it sound like it was the greatest fight ever, and they believed in their guy 100%. But because the fight was probably going to end up being bid on and probably was going to be won by Matchroom and DAZN, it was a fight that Ben Shalom didn't want to lose. He didn't want to lose his fighter for that fight, even if it meant that the fighter had a possibility of winning the British title, which is a very big deal for guys who fight in the UK, women who fight in the UK. The British title is a rite of passage to the world scene. So that's all I have for today, man. I appreciate the few people that did jump on. I apologize about the miscommunication on the link. Only a few people were able to see this today, but I hope that everybody catches this. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video down below. We will see you guys again very, very soon. Thank you for your time, and y'all have a good weekend. Enjoy the fights. Stephen Butler, Yanibek Alim Kanuli, as well as Ismael Barroso against Rolly Romero. Whether you agree with it or not, it is a fight that's going to happen. I'm probably not going to watch, but hey, y'all enjoy. Have a good night.